My wife cheated on me with her boss, stole $250, $0 from our joint account, and now she's claiming half of our property in a bitter legal battle. I never thought I'd lose everything over her lies. Hello, everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons, with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy standing here, writing this story about betrayal and loss, but here I am. It all started with a gut feeling that something was off, but I didn't want to believe it. My wife, Lisa, always seemed a little too busy lately, constantly on her phone, sneaking out at odd hours and snapping at me over little things. At first, I thought she was just stressed from work or maybe had a lot on her plate. She's a high-powered executive, and she's always been good at hiding her stress behind a smile. But then, little things started stacking up. One night, I came home early from work, something I rarely did, and I saw her phone lying on the coffee table unlocked. I normally wouldn't snoop, but something about it caught my eye. There were messages, flirty, suggestive texts from someone named Mark, who I later found out was her boss. I saw pictures of her in a hotel room half-dressed with him. My stomach sank. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I couldn't believe it. My wife, the woman I trusted, was cheating on me with her boss. And it wasn't just a fling. The messages hinted at something serious, a secret affair that had been going on for months. I didn't confront her right away. I needed to process what I'd seen. I sat there staring at her phone, trying to make sense of it all. How could she do this? How could she lie to my face for so long? We had a good life, 2 kids, a nice house, steady jobs. I worked hard to give her the best, and she repaid me with lies and betrayal. I felt angry, hurt, and completely betrayed. It was like my entire world was crumbling around me. The next day, I decided I couldn't keep quiet about it. I needed to hear her side, even if I already knew the truth. When I confronted Lisa, she spun a web of lies so thick I almost believed her at first. She said I was overreacting, that I was paranoid, that Mark was just a friend from work, nothing more. She claimed the hotel pictures were faked or taken out of context, that I was imagining things. But I wasn't stupid. I knew better. I could see the guilt in her eyes, the way she avoided my gaze, the way her hands trembled when she tried to deny it. She told me she was sorry, that she didn't mean for it to happen, that Mark had been pressuring her and she was weak. She said it was just sex, that it didn't mean anything, that she loved me and only me. But her words rang hollow. I could tell she was lying. The more she talked, the more I realized this wasn't just a one-night mistake. It was a full-blown affair, and she had been lying to me for months. I felt like my heart was being ripped out of my chest. I can't even begin to describe the flood of emotions I went through. The initial shock was brutal. I couldn't breathe, my vision blurred, and I felt like I was going to throw up. I was furious, furious at her for cheating, furious at myself for not seeing it sooner, and furious at Mark for invading my life and my marriage. I wanted to lash out, to scream, to break something. But I also felt deep sadness, like I had lost someone I loved, someone I thought was my partner for life. I knew I had to make a decision. I couldn't keep living in this lie, pretending everything was okay. I started thinking about the future, about what I wanted and what I needed to do. I was angry enough to want revenge, but I also knew I had to keep my head clear. I couldn't let her manipulate me anymore. I decided I would find out everything, how much money she'd taken, what she was planning, and how deep this rabbit hole went. I wasn't going to let her walk away with everything, not without consequences. This was just the beginning of a long, painful journey. After that confrontation, I knew I couldn't just sit around and wait for things to blow over. Lisa kept acting like she was the victim, crying, begging me to forgive her, claiming she was sorry and that she loved me. She even threw in the classic line, "It was just sex, it doesn't mean I don't love you." Yeah, right, that's what they all say. I wasn't buying it. I could see through her bullshit. The way she avoided my eyes, the way she kept insisting it was just a mistake, like that somehow made everything okay, made me realize I needed to get real fast. I started digging into our finances. That's when I found out she'd been secretly siphoning money from our joint account for months. Over $250, $0 gone, just like that. I couldn't believe it. I thought we had a good life, a stable one. Turns out she'd been planning her escape or maybe her new life with Mark right under my nose. She transferred the money into accounts I didn't even know existed, bought jewelry, a luxury watch, even a new car. It was like she was preparing to run. I was stunned. Furious isn't even the word. I felt betrayed not just emotionally but financially. That money was supposed to go toward the kids' college fund, our retirement, our future. Now it was all gone, stolen in some sneaky scheme. I started to realize that her lies went way beyond infidelity. She was a thief, a liar, and a manipulator. I couldn't believe I married someone capable of this kind of deception. I knew I had to act fast. I couldn't let her get away with this. I hired a lawyer and started gathering evidence. I wanted to know if she'd been planning this for a while, how deep her betrayal went. I also needed to find out if she'd been talking to Mark about splitting our assets or if she had any other secrets. It was like peeling an onion. Every layer revealed more lies, more deceit. I stayed awake at night, going over every detail, every suspicious thing she'd done, every lie she'd told. Meanwhile, Lisa kept up the act of being the innocent, wronged wife. She'd cry, say she didn't want to lose her family, that she was sorry for everything. But I saw through her tears. I saw the cold calculation behind her eyes. She was trying to manipulate me into feeling guilty, into forgiving her, but I was done. I couldn't trust her anymore. I started to see her for what she was, a liar, a thief, a user. That realization hit me hard. One night I decided to check her phone again just to see if she slipped up, and she did. I found explicit messages with Mark talking about their plans to meet again to seal the deal, as she put it. I saw messages about her wanting to leave me, how she was tired of pretending, how she was planning to take everything she could and walk away. That was the final straw. I knew I had to do something, and fast. I sat there, trembling with anger, feeling like my world was collapsing. I'd always been the guy who believed in honesty, loyalty, the American dream. And now I was faced with the brutal truth that my wife had been living a double life right under my nose. The woman I loved, the woman I'd built a life with, was a complete stranger in many ways. And the worst part, I still loved her, or at least I did until I saw all this. But love wasn't enough anymore. I realized I had to confront her. Again, but this time with a plan. I wasn't just going to yell or throw her out. I was going to get everything I could, protect what was left of my dignity, and figure out how to move forward. I knew this wasn't going to be easy. Her lies ran deep, and her plans were well underway. The next step was clear. I had to expose her, get to the bottom of her schemes, and start thinking about a future without her. I didn't know what that future looked like yet, but I knew it wouldn't include her anymore. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a freight train. My head was pounding and my stomach was in knots. I knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I had to confront Lisa again, but this time I was going in with a plan. I needed answers, and I wasn't going to leave anything to chance. I sat down with my laptop, pulled out all the banking statements, and started piecing together what I could find. I wanted to know exactly how much she'd taken, where she'd moved the money, and what her next move might be. While I was digging through the financial mess, Lisa came into the room, her face pale and eyes red from crying. She tried to act innocent, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I looked right at her and said, "Lisa, I know everything. About the affair, the money, the lies. You've been stealing from us, haven't you?" Her eyes darted away and she stammered, trying to come up with some excuse. I cut her off. "Save it. I've seen the messages, the transfers, everything. You've been planning this for months, haven't you? Leaving me, taking everything we worked for." She broke down crying, trying to manipulate me again. "It's not what you think, Jason. I was just stressed at work, and Mark, he's just a friend. The money, I was going to pay it back. I swear, I didn't mean to hurt you." Her words sounded rehearsed, hollow. I looked at her coldly. "You expect me to believe that? You've been lying since day one. You lied about the affair, about the money, about everything. I don't know who you are anymore." That's when I decided I had enough. I told her I was going to call the lawyer and file for divorce. I wanted her out of my life, out of my house, and I wanted to make sure she couldn't take any more of my money. I also told her I was going to turn her in for theft. Her face twisted with rage and panic. "You can't do that. You're overreacting. We can fix this. Just give me a chance to explain. But I knew better. I'd heard enough lies. I called my lawyer right then and there. I needed legal help to protect what remained of my assets and to start the process of separating from her. I also wanted to get a forensic accountant involved, someone who could trace every dollar she'd stolen. I felt numb but determined. I couldn't let her get away with this. Not after everything. While we waited for the lawyer, Lisa kept begging, crying, trying to convince me that she was sorry, that she'd change, that she still loved me. I looked at her and thought about all the years we'd shared, the promises, the plans, and I realized that love wasn't enough. Not when she'd betrayed me so completely, not when she'd stolen from our family and lied to my face for so long. I told her she needed to leave. I couldn't face her anymore, not as my wife, not with everything she'd done. That day, I packed her bags, helped her find a place to stay, and told her she wasn't welcome back until she sorted out her mess. I also started making arrangements to protect my assets, to ensure she wouldn't take a single dollar more. I knew this wasn't just about infidelity anymore. It was about betrayal on every level, emotional, financial, moral. As she left, she screamed at me, called me a bastard, a jealous idiot, and accused me of ruining her life. But I didn't care. I was numb, broken, but also relieved. I knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. I had a long legal battle ahead, and I had to face the reality that I might lose everything: my marriage, my savings, my peace of mind. But I also knew that I had to stand my ground. I deserved better than this, and I was finally ready to fight for what was rightfully mine. That night, I sat alone in my house, staring at the empty space where she used to sleep. I felt a mix of anger, sadness, and a strange sense of clarity. I'd been betrayed in every way possible, but I'd also learned something crucial. Trust is fragile, and sometimes you have to cut out the poison to survive. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew I wouldn't let her take my life without a fight. I was done being the victim. Now I was going to be the one in control. Over the next few days, everything moved so fast I could barely keep up. The moment Lisa left, I called the lawyer again, and we immediately started putting plans into motion. The first step was freezing her access to our joint accounts. I had to protect what little was left, especially after discovering she'd already moved a significant chunk of the money into her own accounts. The bank flagged the transfers, but I knew she'd try to hide more. I also hired a private investigator to follow her, just to see if she was planning to run or if she was meeting Mark again. Meanwhile, I started digging into her phone and emails myself, looking for anything I might have missed. I found more explicit messages between her and Mark, talking about sneaking away, about how she couldn't wait to be free of this boring marriage, and how she planned to start fresh with him. It made my stomach turn. I also found out she'd been secretly visiting a lawyer for months, preparing for this exact moment. Divorce papers, custody arrangements, and even a plan to claim half of everything we owned. It hit me hard. The woman I thought I knew, my wife, my partner, had been plotting her escape for a long time. She wasn't just cheating, she was planning to take everything. And I was too blind or too trusting to see it. I felt like a fool, but at the same time I was furious. How could she betray me this way? How could she lie and steal, all while pretending to be the loving wife? It was like I'd been living in a nightmare. The legal process was brutal. My lawyer told me Lisa had filed for divorce and was claiming half of our property, our house, the savings, everything. She also demanded custody of the kids, which I knew she'd use as leverage. I had to prepare for a bitter fight. I started gathering evidence, texts, bank statements, witness statements from friends who saw her sneaking around, and even her own admissions. I wanted to show the court the full extent of her betrayal. The hardest part was facing the reality that I might lose everything. Not just the money, but also my marriage, my family, my reputation. I kept asking myself how I could have been so blind. I'd always been the guy who believed in loyalty, honesty, the American dream. And now I was staring down the possibility that I'd be left with nothing but the scars of this betrayal. In the middle of all this chaos, Lisa started playing the victim. She told everyone she was forced into a corner, that I was abusive, jealous, controlling. She painted herself as the wronged wife, the victim of my supposed paranoia. I knew better. I knew her lies, her manipulations. I refused to let her spin this story her way. I had proof, texts, financial records, witness accounts that showed her true colors. One day, I found out she'd been secretly negotiating with Mark about selling our house and splitting the proceeds. That was the final straw. I realized she was willing to burn everything down just to be with him. She didn't care about the damage she was doing to our family or me. It was all about her escape, her new life. That realization made me even more determined. I wasn't going to let her walk away with a single penny of what we built together. I also discovered she'd been secretly withdrawing money from our accounts, more than I initially thought. I had to confront her lawyer, and we filed a motion to freeze her assets and prevent her from transferring any more funds. I also started preparing for the custody battle. I wanted full custody of the kids, not because I didn't want them to see their mother, but because I couldn't trust her anymore. She lied, stolen, and betrayed us in ways I never imagined possible. Every day felt like walking through a minefield. I was angry, hurt, and exhausted. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I'd been betrayed on every level, but I was starting to see a way out. I knew this was going to get uglier before it got better. The legal battle was just beginning. And I had to stay strong. I had to keep fighting, not just for my money or my house, but for my dignity and my kids' future. I was determined to come out of this with some semblance of my life intact, even if it meant losing everything else along the way. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of court dates, lawyer meetings, and endless nights of reviewing documents. Lisa was relentless. She hired her own attorney, and suddenly the whole thing turned into a legal war. She kept claiming she was the victim, saying I was abusive, controlling, and that her affair with Mark was just a moment of weakness. She spun stories about how she only took the money because she was desperate and felt trapped, trying to paint herself as the wronged woman. But I knew her game. I had the evidence, text messages, bank transfers, witness statements, and I made sure it all got filed. I also discovered she'd been secretly contacting Mark, arranging to meet him at a hotel, planning her escape. She'd been talking about how she couldn't wait to get away, to start fresh with him, leaving me and the kids behind. The thought of her running off with Mark, taking everything I worked for, made my blood boil. I felt betrayed on every level, emotionally, financially, morally. This was no longer just about infidelity. It was about her trying to destroy us all. Meanwhile, I was fighting to keep custody of the kids. Lisa's lawyer argued she was the better parent, but I had proof she'd been neglecting her responsibilities, sneaking around behind my back and stealing from us. I knew I had to be relentless. I hired a private investigator to gather more evidence of her lifestyle, photos of her meeting Mark, her secret meetings, her attempts to hide her new plans. I was determined to show the court how unfit she was to be the primary caregiver. The most shocking moment came when I found out she'd been secretly transferring large sums of money into offshore accounts, trying to hide her assets. She'd been planning her escape for months, maybe even years. It was like a slap in the face. After everything, she still had the nerve to lie, steal, and scheme. I felt sick. I'd given her everything, my love, my trust, my hard-earned money, and she repaid me with lies, theft, and betrayal. I also learned that she'd been talking to a divorce lawyer for months, preparing her side of the story, making sure she'd get half of everything in the end. That realization made me furious. I was ready to fight for every penny, every right I had. I wasn't going to let her take my house, my savings, or my future without a fight. I pushed for full custody of the kids, knowing she'd use them as leverage, but I was determined to keep them with me. They were innocent in all this, and I'd do anything to protect them from her manipulations. The more I fought, the more I realized how deep her lies went. She'd been living a double life for so long I wondered if I ever truly knew her. This wasn't just a betrayal. It was a complete destruction of everything I believed in. I started questioning whether I should even try to save the marriage or just cut my losses and move on. But deep down, I knew I had to see this through, if only to prove to myself that I was stronger than her lies. The hardest part was watching her try to manipulate the system. to turn the court against me, claiming I was the bad guy. She played the victim so convincingly I almost believed her. But I had evidence, a clear timeline, and the truth on my side. I knew I'd have to be relentless, patient, and strategic if I wanted to come out of this with some sense of justice. I was exhausted, emotionally drained, but I refused to give up. I owed it to myself and my kids to fight for what was right, even if it meant losing everything else in the process. The final court hearing was a blur of emotions and legal jargon I barely understood at the time. I sat there, watching Lisa try to spin her story, her eyes darting around, desperate to cling to whatever shred of innocence she could muster. Meanwhile, I had all my evidence laid out: texts, bank statements, witness testimonies, that painted a very different picture. I saw her attempt to manipulate the judge, claiming I was controlling and jealous, but the truth was plain to see. She had betrayed me in every way possible: cheating, stealing, scheming, and I was determined to make sure she paid for it. When the judge finally delivered the verdict, it wasn't easy to hear. She granted me full custody of the kids, awarded me most of the assets, and ordered her to pay back the stolen money. She was furious, shouting and crying, but I felt nothing but a strange relief. I had fought tooth and nail for months, and in the end I managed to hold on to what mattered most: my children, my dignity, and what little stability I had left. I knew this wasn't the end of her schemes, but it was a major victory for me. After everything was settled, I packed up her belongings and helped her move out. Watching her walk away, I felt a mix of anger and sadness: anger at her betrayal, sadness for what we'd lost. But there was also a strange sense of liberation. I realized I'd been living in a nightmare for so long, and finally I was waking up. I didn't want her back, not after all she'd done. I wanted to rebuild my life, piece by piece, and focus on my kids. In the aftermath, I spent months healing. I cut all ties with her, blocked her from my life, and focused on repairing what she'd nearly destroyed. I found a new job, started therapy, and slowly began to trust again. The financial damage was significant, but I was determined to recover, learning from my mistakes and making sure I was smarter about who I trusted. I also made a vow to myself: never again would I ignore the red flags, never again would I let someone betray me so deeply. Looking back, I realize how much I've grown. I learned that love can be a beautiful thing, but it also requires trust, honesty, and integrity. Without those, it's just a fragile illusion. I also learned that sometimes you have to fight like hell to protect what's yours, even when it feels impossible. I lost a lot in this process: money, trust, a marriage, but I gained clarity and strength I never knew I had. To anyone going through something similar, I'd say this: trust your instincts. Don't ignore the signs. When someone shows you they're capable of betrayal, don't make excuses. Protect yourself and your family. And if the worst happens, remember that you're stronger than you think. You can rebuild better, wiser, and more resilient than before. Because in the end, betrayal can break you, but it can also make you stronger if you let it.